Hey folks, Jack here with just a quick little video of a little, I don't know if you call it an invention or gadget or whatever, but something I came up with, and I call it a poke planter. And this is one of those things you don't need, but it just might make your life as a gardener a little bit better for low to moderate quantity planting of things that you want to direct seed where you want to put them in a very specific place. And so there's a lot of seed that this maybe won't work the best for. Like if it's a really large seed, there's better options for planters, like a stand planter or something like that, which I'll put a link to in the video notes below for you. Or if it's really fine seed, it might be kind of tedious to do this. It might be something more for a furrow where you just drop them in, or something like carrot or something like that. But a lot of seed that is like small seed, it won't really work in something like a jab planter. Or it maybe is not really appropriate for something like the stand planter. Let's say that you wanted to pop, let's say, especially if you're interplanting, that's what this is really great for. So you had all of your vegetables going and you were heading into fall and you wanted to start interseeding something so that as the fall vegetables wane off and the winter takes over, let's say you wanted to put in some radish or something like that. Well, all you do is you take your tube, you put it where you want it. If you have mulch, maybe you push the mulch out of the way with it a little bit. You drop a seed in and you take your poker and then you push down, and I usually just use my thumb and push down, and you can see that sticks out. Now, to me, the real innovation with this is a very, very simple thing that I did, which is I put 2 nuts on it. And by having 2 nuts, you can make sure that they don't turn on their own. And that way, you're creating a lock on your nuts. And then that way, I know that's going to make some of you giggle because you're teenagers in your mind, but that way you can control how much of this sticks out the end of your tube. And I'll tell you exactly what this tubing is here in a minute, give you some advice on making your own if you don't use the exact same stuff that I did. But the beauty of that is if I'm planting a specific seed, and I know that seed needs to be about a 1/2 inch deep, every seed is a 1/2 inch deep. And I've tested this. I've used it on peas. I've used it on radish and other smaller seed that's not really tiny. But I've actually used it with lettuce, and it worked fine with lettuce. With lettuce, I'll put a pinch 2 or 3 seeds in, and you either prick out if it's too much, or you go ahead and let it grow as a clump. But it's worked really, really well. But if I turn around and the next thing I want to plant is something that needs to be really shallow and get a little bit of light, I can bring that up and maybe leave an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch sticking out of the end. Or if I have something that's a little bit, I want to go ahead and get it down, 3/4 inch, I can make that adjustment to any way that I want to. So the parts, you're talking about some cheap nuts. You don't need really high-end Duratorx or anything, but whatever fits the size of all thread that you're going to use. And you can buy pre-cut all thread to a length that will work for you, or you can buy longer pieces and cut it yourself. If you cut all thread for any reason whatsoever, throw a nut on the side you're going to cut. Then go ahead, do your cut, maybe take your sharp spots off with a light file, and then take your nut back off. And that will clean those threads up where you did the cut and make it where you can actually put nuts on and off again. If you forget to do it, just put it on the other side. Then you got to work your nut all the way to the other side. Again, I know some of you teenagers in your head are giggling every time I say work your nut or something like that. But it's a really simple thing. Do you need it? No. I mean, there's nothing that stops you from going and poke a hole with your finger and throw a seed in it. What I find with this, though, when you're doing that, you end up with dirt on your hands. I don't care if my hands get dirty, but if it's wet outside or something, you end up, now you're trying to pick seeds up. Your hands are dirty. The seeds are getting mashed up. It just makes everything a little bit more complicated, and that equals time. So it's really a time-saving device and a precision device, because I can lean over something, put my tube in, drop my seed, go ahead and pop that seed into the ground. And if I feel it needs cover, it's just, your free hand that's not touching the seed, just push the dirt back in or push the mulch back over. And again, everywhere I've used it, it's worked really well. There's nothing spectacular about it. It's not some amazing thing. It's certainly not something I would trademark or patent or be selling. But the tubing here is just a piece of PEX. And I don't think it really matters what you use. This is the concept. But I love the all thread because the all thread enables the depth adjustment feature. And I don't know a better or easier or more reliable way to do that. So all you want to do is you want to size whatever you use as tubing and your all thread so that there's very little gap around. So if you're doing a smaller seed, you're going to actually push it into the ground. Then there's a couple things to know. Wet is fine. Damp is fine. Really, really wet, muddy, gunky, it won't work well. You're going to end up with all kinds of mud clumped up on your plunger, and it's going to make a mess. And then the seed's going to stick to it. So you want to do this at a time when it's relatively dry will be best. If you irrigate your garden, hold off on irrigation until your planting's done, which is smart anyway, and then irrigate after you're done, and you probably won't have any trouble. But really wet clay or something, this may not work as well for. The other thing is your soil has to be pliable enough that you're not hammering this thing down and basically cracking seeds. So if you have really hard compacted soil, rectify that. This is not going to do well for you planting into very hard pan soil. Other than that, it's a couple bucks to make one of these. And one of the things I've thought about and I haven't done yet is possibly to put some sort of a lanyard on the plunger so that you can let it dangle and free up your hand. Probably the easiest way to do that is to drill a hole in it and put the lanyard through it. And that would let this hand kind of like do its thing and then just reach down and grab your plunger. So that might be an addition I make. At one point, I thought of making some kind of like a magazine for seeds to like feed in. I think it's unnecessary and probably too much work for what you would get out of it. But it's a really simple thing, and it's basically doing the same thing that like a no-till drill does, except it's manual and one-off. Anyway, if you do happen to make one and use it, I'd love to know about it. Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think about it. And again, a couple bucks, and you too can plant your seeds at any depth you want and stay consistent and uniform in doing so.